So box, 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 box.
Hi, my name is Rochelle and you're watching or listening to BoxBox F1 Pod. Welcome to the Canada Grand Prix episode and welcome to the other side of my kitchen. Today we're going to be debriefing everything that happened this weekend. There was a lot. It was a very chaotic race. There's so much to discuss and usually I'm like, this is a bad weekend to have this, but usually I have a very structured outline. I usually over structure it because I get distracted easily and it helps me stay on track. But this time I was kind of loosey-goosey with my outline. So this may be a very chaotic episode, which I guess in hindsight is very reflective of the weekend we will be discussing. And in addition to everything that happened on track, which was a lot, we will also be discussing all of the announcements and everything in between that was happening off track. And there's a lot to debrief. To commemorate Canada, I will be making two Canadian classics. One is poutine. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I think I am. As you can see, I will not be making anything from scratch, but I will be assembling from scratch. But the gravy is homemade, it's just not made by me. The cheese curds I'm not gonna make, and I'm not gonna deep fry fries. So today is an assembly sort of day. But I'll move that to the side because we're gonna be starting with an iced capp. So if anyone's been to Tim Hortons, you know that's like an instant Canadian classic. My friend's obsessed with them, my friend from Toronto. And in her honor, I will be making the iced capp, but I will be spiking it. So it's gonna be like an iced capp martini. So I will be starting with that. And we are on this side of the kitchen because I need to make the espresso for the drink. So I'm gonna get that started and we are gonna dive straight into the Canadian Grand Prix. But first, it's time for the digital warm-up. Lap 1, Esteban. Oh, Esteban. So previously on the trials and tribulations of Esteban Ocon, in Monaco, he crashed into Pierre, he was out of the race, he lost an opportunity for his team to get points other than the 1 point that Pierre got them. And Bruno, the team principal who took over Otmar, made a very ominous threat to the French media saying that there will be consequences. And what I am sensing is a common approach by F1 teams. Esteban released a very long statement, like a week after the Grand Prix, stating his commitment to the team. It reads like this. Much has been said in the aftermath of the Monaco Grand Prix. While I have received many messages of support, I have been deeply saddened by the amount of abuse and negativity that I've received online regarding my career, my character, my driving, and my career. Thanks to the hard work, support, and sacrifices of many people, I've raced in over 140 Grand Prix so far since my debut in 2016. I've always been a tough competitor, and like most drivers, I've had my fair share of incidents. I've been lucky to race alongside talented and experienced teammates, including race winners Daniel, Checo, and Pierre, and a double champion in Fernando. As teammates, we would often start races very close to each other, which in some cases meant some tough battles on track and sometimes contact. Of course, I have made honest mistakes. We are not robots. We are athletes pushing ourselves to the limit every day to achieve our dreams of winning races. F1 is a sport where emotions are high and passion runs deep. I see and feel this every weekend at the track and on social media, the good and the bad. But the misinformed statements and gross distortions that I have seen online in recent days about my ability to work with a team have been inaccurate, hurtful, and damaging. Since my first laps in motorsport, I have approached this sport with humility, professionalism, and respect. These values were instilled in me at a very young age. While each driver chases individual glory, this will always be a team sport first and foremost. I have always followed instructions I have been given and raced to achieve the maximum for and with my team. I took responsibility for the incident on lap 1 last Sunday, and despite my DNF, I am glad the team added a point to the tally in what has been a difficult start to the season for all of us. I respect Pierre as a teammate and as a competitor. We have always worked collaboratively and professionally inside the team, and this will continue to be the case. There is no reward without risk in Formula One, and race starts are intense, even more so in Monaco, where the opening lap can dictate your finishing result. In the end, we are all competitors, and hard, fair racing throughout the field is what makes our sport so great and the main reason why I love this sport so much. I'm looking forward to competing in Montreal in front of the fantastic Canadian fans and the exciting opportunities the future holds. Esteban. Okay, so we have seen this before. When Daniel had issues with the team, they made him release a statement saying how committed he was to the team and to F1 and blah, 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 blah. They released a whole statement. I'll link it in the show notes if you haven't read it. But the part that stuck out to me the most, that was annoying, is Bruno saying, "We wish Esteban the very best for the next chapter of his driving career when that moment comes." As if he knows that he's just ruined Esteban's entire career. And like, I'm not defending Esteban in the sense that I don't think it was time for some repercussions for how he's behaved in the past. He certainly deserves some repercussions. And as nice as he is, and he goes on a whole rant about being Mr. Nice Guy at the end of the Canadian Grand Prix, we'll go over it. But as much as he claims to be the nice guy, we've seen this issue time and time again. When it was Checo, we're like, well, Checo's also fiery. When it was Fernando, we're like, well, Fernando has a history of doing this. And Pierre and him hate each other, but the only constant here is Esteban, despite anyone else having reputations. Pierre's statement was, honestly, Pierre was like following PR clearly as closely as he possibly could, but I feel like we all know he's kind of gloating right now. Like, this is the outcome you would want for your arch nemesis since you were 10. I don't know. He basically said they worked very professionally together and cooperate, and he wants to mention this. He literally said, I would like to mention this, that we're very professional, we've cooperated, and it's been amazing, and it hasn't always been easy, but we've done it, and that's all he's gonna say. That was the statement. Could have been better. All right. Okay, so that was Pierre's statement. It was actually horrible. And now I'll read Esteban's statement. BWT Alpine F1 team and I have agreed together to part ways at the end of the 2024 F1 season. The Enstone Viry family has played a significant part in my life dating back to my Lotus Junior program days. I feel incredibly lucky and privileged to have achieved the things that I did with this team, from my first podium to my first win in Formula One. These achievements truly were dreams come true. I've crossed paths with so many inspiring individuals in my time here, and there are so many people to thank for their hard work, passion, and dedication to the cause, but also for their kindness and support I received over the years. We've had many ups and certainly some downs, but all I can say is that it was an honor racing alongside you, whether you were at the factories or trackside. Still, there is a long way to go this season, and my focus and energy is 100% dedicated to this team and the work we need to do together to move forward and maximize our results on track. Like many drivers this season, a lot has been said about my future beyond 2024. News will be announced in due course. Should I read the French part? Just kidding. So that's that with Esteban Ocon. And by the way, that's like a very sweet statement. He's upset. I kind of think rightfully so. There must have been a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, but it's embarrassing. And I feel for him. I don't think he's going to have a seat next year, which is unfortunate because he is a good driver, but he does seem to be a difficult teammate, and that's important. And Pierre is lucky AF. All right, lap 2. F1 news that's not Esteban. Yuki's RB contract has been extended, I believe, by a year. And I think that's until 2026. I assume it's because that's when Honda is going to re-enter, along with Aston Martin, I think. Unless they're here next year too. I assume he goes where Honda goes, and I think this year buys him some time to continue to show how much he's growing and thriving, and I'm so happy we're not saying goodbye to him, because what is a weekend without Yuki Tsunoda? In other news, Checo's Red Bull contract has been extended by 2 years, which caused a lot more surprise than Yuki. He was extended by, I said 2 years, but there was a lot of speculation who would go there. I don't think that was the place for Carlos, so I think that's fine, but it is a little frustrating to see. Oh, because I think the Alpine seat will go to Jack Doohan, the reserve driver, who I love and I'm excited to see. But there's so many, there's such limited seating and there's so many good drivers. And if Carlos Sainz is at Williams, which is currently the rumor, and James Vowles has said that he is their number one option, it's just a shame to see that talent go there. And like, fingers crossed that is just for next year, and 2026 will bring a lot more shakeups that could potentially put him in a better seat. But goddamn, losing Carlos to that back of the grid, horrible. But one funny thing that happened was, so first Red Bull said that they have news coming in the next couple of days, and then Alpine released the news that Esteban's leaving the team. So Red Bull posted, "We understand that without our agreement, Alpine F1 have released a statement regarding Esteban Ocon, causing wild speculation over our stay tuned announcement." Lol. Also, the fact that Oscar will be quoted to the end of time, iconic. All right, lap 3, off-duty F1. First things first, Zak got a Miami tattoo. If you weren't around when Danny Rick was at McLaren, that became a tradition then because he would make bets with people to win. And he made a bet with Daniel that once you win a race, I will do something. Daniel wanted him to get a tattoo. And Daniel won a race and Zak got a tattoo of Monza. And so now he had to keep the tradition going. And he honestly better stop building such a good car because he's going to have a whole sleeve at this rate if this is the price he pays for winning a race. He got the Miami track, which just like the Monza track, not a cute tattoo. It just looks weird and phallic. And I don't think it belongs on a body. But anyway, he let Lando take the gun and do part of it, which is wild. Zak degaffs, I guess, now. That's like a crazy thing to just hand Lando a tattoo gun, but I digress. The photo is hilarious though. He wrote, "Yes, I did it again. Another tattoo, this time for our win in Miami and Lando's first in F1. I have to say," and Lando, by the way, can't stop doing this. He is doing the #1 sign wherever he fucking goes. Like, it's insane. But the rest of the statement says, "I have to say it was just as painful as the first time. Thankfully, Lando was there to give me all the encouragement I needed, ... In other news, the most frequent non-F1 people to grace this podcast, Chloe, Stroll, and Scotty James, are having a baby, and they did such a cute photo shoot, like very like 90s era Gap commercial, like with the jeans and the shirt, and she looks great pregnant, and it's very exciting. I wish we got some Papa Stroll content, some Lance content, but I'm sure he was very happy. The Aston team did give them a little baby Aston Martin t-shirt, very cute. Speaking of children, the Oscar Piastri Leclerc joke is now part of F1 canon, and it won't go away. And McLaren is riding on Oscar's comedy coattails, basically, because Oscar just teed everyone up for success with this. Ferrari tweeted a picture of Charles and Arthur Leclerc and wrote, "2 Leclercs are better than 1." And then McLaren retweeted it and photoshopped Oscar looking around from behind the corner and said 3. And then Charles photoshopped Leo into the background and was like 4. It's never gonna get old. And I almost feel that Oscar has realized that his genealogy joke has, it's hit its prime, and it can't get better than this. So I think he's going to stop searching for his genealogy at every race, because what could be better than peaking as Oscar Piastri Leclerc? Also, side note, I really need some of these interviewers and journalists to do their job and talk to Oscar about his mother. I would love to hear Oscar's POV on his mother tweeting, because I think she's hilarious. And also, I need some of them to do their job and get Nicole on TV. On social, on TV. She needs to be front and center. She should be doing commentary. I don't care. I just need to see her in more than just her Twitter feed. So please, someone at F1, make it happen. So for those of you not on TikTok, there is a trend called "Can you watch my blank for a second?" It started out with "Can you watch my boyfriend for a second?" And it's evolved to anyone. So people do it with their boss, and then people just start doing it with random people. And it's basically someone's like, "Oh, guys, can you watch this person for a second?" As if they're vlogging. And then or on a live, and they put the phone in front of the person and walk off. And it's just observing what that person does in that situation. And they've all been low-key, high-key hilarious. And I feel like it's weird because you can tell that you're not on a live. I don't know what the phone is set up to look like to make them think that there's actually people watching them live, but they all seem to think that. So we did that here. F1 Toni, if you guys don't follow her on TikTok or Instagram, she's amazing. She does very technical explanations of the business side of F1 and the engineering side of F1 and just F1 in general. She's just a great follow. And she got to interview the Ferrari boys this week. And so she did this trend with Carlos And honestly, I was surprised at how unaware he was of this trend because Carlos is like chronically online and I feel like there's nothing he misses. And she puts it in front of him and she's like, hey, can you guys watch Carlos for a second? And then Carlos looks so disheveled and confused and he just like stares off after her and he's like, who is this? Hello? And then he starts fixing his hair and then he catches on. He's like, oh, so there's no one here when she comes back. It was very funny. But I shared it on Instagram and tagged her and she responded, for once we got in early with the trend because he had absolutely no idea what was happening and we just told him to play along and run with it. And I just think that's hilarious. 10 out of 10. Love it. This was also done to Oscar, who was having breakfast, and he looked so perplexed. The admin just put the camera in front of him. He was like, hey guys, could you watch my driver for a second, and walked away. And he's like, okay, welcome to my breakfast. He was so confused. And then Mercedes did it to Toto. And Toto just stared down the camera where like he like flipped the trend and it was him watching us, not us watching him. And then when he came back, he turns to the admin. You can see him turn to the admin and goes, are you out of your mind? But put that in an Austrian accent. It was so funny. In other news, beyond TikTok trends, Lewis Hamilton was on Hot Ones. And I think my favorite part, he looked great. I love seeing Lewis in less PR-y situations, and nothing un-PRs you like a really hot vegan cauliflower wing. And it was great. But like one of my favorite parts is at the beginning, he was like, I've canceled on you several times. And the interviewer was like, yeah, but you sent me a succulent as an apology. And I find that so funny that he does that. And then he talked about Roscoe a bit. He talked about a lot of things. He talked about Roscoe and how Roscoe likes to poop in front of other drivers' trailers, and he talks about he always poops in front of George's, and the interviewer was like, I know he has a name and I know everyone knows his name, I just literally it's popped out of my brain. And the interviewer goes, Roscoe does the rounds, takes a dump, and really sets the tone for the team. And Lewis is like, yeah. And then my favorite, like this was the clip that they shared to promote it, but he does like a quick fire round of like F1 terms for Lewis to explain. And the first one is blistering, like blistering tires. And so he goes, so what's blistering? And Lewis goes, what's blistering? My mouth. It was a spicy wing. I thought it was funny. I've linked it if you want to watch the whole thing. It's a good watch. All right, lap 4, trackside in Montreal. So Jacques Villeneuve, who I think is the track named after his father, Gilles Villeneuve. I don't know how to, Gilles Villeneuve, but French. Anyway, however you say it, named after his father. But he was also an F1 driver, obviously. He actually won the world championship with Williams. Hard to believe that ever happened, but he did. And he's also apparently an amateur musician, so that's the first line of Wikipedia for you. But so he kind of just tells it like it is. And sometimes I love it when people, actually I always like it when people tell it like it is. But his was like bordering mean. He said about Daniel Ricciardo, why is he still in F1? You all talk about those first 2 seasons. He was beating a Vettel that was burnt out and trying to invent things. Then he was beating for half a season an 18-year-old Verstappen. He stopped beating anyone after that. I think his image has kept him in F1 more than his actual results. I think that is slightly over-exaggerated, but it is not untrue. But I also don't think that's a bad thing. And Daniel has had more successes in the way he's describing it. Daniel is like, has won many races. He's a really, really good driver. Don't know how much we can say that about this season or last. So he might be past his prime, but that doesn't mean that he sucks. Daniel responded after sending it to P5 in qualifying. He said, I heard he's been talking shit, but he always does. I think he's hit his head a few many times. I don't know if, all right. I think he's hit his head a few too many times. I don't know if he plays ice hockey or something. I won't give him the time of day, but all those people can suck it, is what he said. Which sounds wrong. I got it from ESPN. All right, well, so he did say that. Okay, it's a bit dramatic. Is the ice hockey thing like a quip at Canadians? Okay. Charles, there was another clip. I'm moving on, sorry. Charles was in the media pen talking about after qualifying, and you see his PR person show him the phone for his statement, and he like reads it, and then literally goes, "I'll say what I want." Into the microphone in English. Sir. While that might have just been him like, I don't need to read this word for word, I know what to say. What it sounded like was, fuck you in your statement, I'll do what I want. And he didn't say anything that insane for it to be like a fuck you type situation, but it was just funny. Anyway, that's weird. I thought I had more to say, but that concludes our digital warm-up. On to the race rhyme.
From Justin Bieber to Timmy Hortons to maple syrup in large proportions, there are some things we've learned to expect in Montreal, and yet there's always something that will surprise us all. One thing some of the strategies struggle to factor, the rain being an unpaid actor. But boy oh boy did it give us drama aplenty, eh? Let's kick this recap off with quali. What do you say? About Daniel Ricciardo, Jacques Villeneuve started chatting shit, so he sent it to P5 because he's a motherfucking Danny Rick. Checo is out in Q1, as he tends to do, while both Ferraris have a surprise exit in Q2. But the real question is somebody going to match George's freak? It's Max Verstappen with the exact same time, not missing a single beat. When the lights go out on Sunday, every pit wall is channeling their best Karen Smith. Sometimes I feel like they'd be better off predicting the weather with their tits. From Monaco hero to Montreal zero, 'tis Charles Leclerc's fate. And once Carlos slips in DNFs, we can write off this whole weekend as a massive Ferrari waste. Carlos takes Albon with him, which evokes a safety car for caution, and both of them join Logan, Charles, and Checo as Canada's fallen. F1 math is 5 DNFs plus 2 safety cars plus 1.5 rain showers, equaling non-stop chaos and racy racing for 2 whole hours. And our top 5 did not disappoint. They put on a thrilling show in a bid for points. At the start, George successfully held on to the lead. Then Lando came charging past Max and George on his papaya steed. Then Max passed George while Lando held on basically through 2 safety cars, and that's where puddles and mistakes brought out some fun spars. Behind Max, we saw George, then Lando, then Oscar, then George, then Oscar, then Lando, then Lewis, then George yet again, with the top 3 finally settling to Max, Lando, then George at the very end. That's it for a very chaotic yet exhilarating race in Montreal. Next to Spain. Until then, au revoir. Okay. On to analysis. And while we chat about the race, I will be assembling my team. So I'm gonna heat up my gravy, make the fries in the air fryer. Please no one judge me that I'm not making everything from scratch. I do not want to deep fry. Don't want to make cheese curds from scratch. So here we are. And while I do, let's start off with quali. By the way, this is the part that I did not plan as well. So this may get a little chaotic, and for that I apologize. Ow. So the craziest part, well, Checo was out in Q1, which honestly these days is not that surprising anymore. And what is surprising though was that both Ferraris were out in Q2, which is insane. I don't know what happened. I don't know who made what deal with what which, but clearly we're paying the price of Charles winning Monaco. Because remember, we all knew that we're gonna see a different Charles. Doesn't mean we're gonna see a different everything else. George out-qualifies Max for pole by setting literally the exact same time. Exact to the millisecond. But because he set it first, he gets pole position, which is kind of amazing. And to celebrate, he gets on his car and does his intro video pose, the Jesus Christ Superstar pose. Iconic, honestly. George is cringe. The word iconic usually wouldn't cross your mind, but I do love that he did that pose. He's probably been waiting to do that pose for a achievement where he could sit in a car and do it since it went viral. My dog's coming because as soon as she hears a bag crinkling, she thinks it's cheese for her. It's not for you. A big part of qualifying, big part of the whole weekend was definitely the rain. It was chaotic and it was horrible and it was downpouring. She's so cute. She's sitting with one paw up. Okay, sorry, I'm getting distracted.
Okay, so the rain was pretty chaotic. There was like, at one point they couldn't like drain the track because it was so wet and so, like, I don't know, the drainage is bad. Mercedes posted a bunch of videos of like Lewis drinking like some tea, looking at like hail-like rainstorm happening outside. But you know, it always does make things interesting. And it was not Spa crazy rain or like Japan crazy rain, but it was rainy enough to make things fun. Anyway, the starting grid for the race is as follows. George, Max, Lando, Oscar, Daniel, Alonso, Lewis, Yuki, Lance, Alex, Charles, Carlos, Logan, Kevin, Pierre, Checo, Nico, Ocon, Valtteri, and Guan Yu. And both kick Saubers, Valtteri and Zhou Guan Yu, are starting from the pit lane. All right. So as I said, the weather was an unpaid actor, and it basically set the vibe for the whole day because, first of all, strategies were up in the air. And as usual, my favorite part about F1 is that these are very talented, very skilled people, but their one weakness is reading a fucking weather radar. And to be fair, this weekend was better than most, but we were still getting conflicting weather reports from across the grid. The rain is coming in 20 minutes. Actually, the rain's coming in 10 minutes. Actually, the rain's right around the corner. This is as bad as it's gonna get. It might get a little worse. No more rain. There's gonna be more rain. It's just like all over the place. Timing wise, it was pretty spot on. It was just kind of funny the way we like kept getting radios from people being like, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And then there was one point where Crofty was like, you can see the clouds closing in. And then the camera pans to like a blue sky and Crofty goes, not there. the other clouds looming in. And the camera like shifts over to the gray clouds. It was pretty funny. All right, so again, prefacing this can be a little chaotic, I'm so sorry. So George had a great start and he went off ahead and he was maintaining his lead for the most part. The first like 15-ish laps or so. There was one point where Max was gaining on him and then he like swerved onto a curb. And I think this is the moment, I never found confirmation about when it happened, but I think this is the moment when he saw groundhog. But he called it a beaver. And during the post-race press conference, George was like, imagine if it was a beaver. And Max goes, oh, because like into your tires. It was kind of funny. So poor Max, like he was like, last time I was in Canada, a bird got stuck in my car. And this time I almost hit a groundhog. Him and nature just don't, there's one thing that can stop Max Verstappen. It's not another driver, it's nature. Send an animal after him. I would love to see Over the Hedge. You know that movie, Over the Hedge? Great movie, by the way. That movie, Max Verstappen edition, and it's just that crew of animals trying to stop Max from getting the world championship. Did I just come up with like Cars Over the Hedge crossover brilliance? Catch it in theaters in 2045. I don't know how fast we can animate these days. Anyway. Max swerved to avoid the groundhog. And while he maintained his position, it did slow him down enough for George to get away and for Lando to catch up to him. And it was just a few laps later that DRS was enabled and Lando was able to overtake Max after a couple of tries. And it was very exciting because there's nothing I love to see more than Max being overtaken with merit. Not that any of the other times that he's lost this year don't count. But in this particular instance, it wasn't because his car was worse or broken or damaged. It was like on par with everyone else. It was down to the conditions of the environment. And I love that. And Lando overtook him and immediately swerved in to overtake George. And then Lando was leading the race and it was amazing. And I think this is one of the first times we've seen the fight for the first position this year, if that makes sense. Not happen because someone pitted or because Max started in P8 or whatever. Once Lando overtakes George starts making mistakes. We've all seen George when he panics, when he gets desperate, mistakes start to happen. He goes off track a bit, ends up back in P2, but Max takes advantage of this like blunder and ends up overtaking George. And George ends up back in P3. Poor George, started P1, did the thing. We were all rooting for him, but here we are. George was noted for rejoining the track unsafely because it did look kind of unsafe-ish, but George was noted for rejoining the track unsafely. I didn't see an issue, and I guess race control ended up also not seeing an issue because I don't think it went any further. Behind us, Lewis and Fernando were like battling for centuries. I think Lewis ended up overtaking Fernando due to a safety car later on in the race, but at this point he's still just trying to pass Fernando, and Fernando's like, not today, sir. Lap 25-ish. So earlier in the race, Logan had an incident, but he managed to reverse and get back onto the track. But around lap 25, he hits the wall and he's just gone. And it just makes me sad because he started P13. He was having a good day. And just like this wet track, man, it just like gets you when you least expect it. So Logan DNF'd on quite a narrow portion of the track, so they had to call a safety car. Unfortunately for little Lando Norris, the safety car was called literally just as his car passed the entrance to the pit lane. So he had to do an extra lap while George and Max were able to pit, and everyone was able to pit. And he does pit after them, but he comes out in P3 and loses the lead. DNF count so far, 1, Logan. Not for long. Charles has been struggling literally all weekend, but today specifically. So a couple laps into the race, he was told that there was an engine issue that he had to manage. And then when they pitted during the safety car, he rebooted his car, or like pressed some buttons, and the engine issue seemed to be resolved. But instead of putting him on intermediate tires, they put him on hard tires. And the reason they did this is because, I forgot, I'm assuming it was Spa, but at a race last year, the people who had stayed out on hard tires during a gap in the weather ended up succeeding more so than everyone else. Unfortunately, they timed it really poorly because the dry spell was much shorter than I think they thought, and the rain shower pretty much started right after the safety car, and it's like impossible to drive on his tires in that condition. And he was at one point over a minute behind the lead, which is slow. And so he DNF'd, and he was deeply unhappy. I will say that communication has gotten better. While he was very frustrated today and there was a lot of things out of his control when he was having the engine issues. So Charles asks how much he's losing down the straights, and Brian says quite a bit, but keep pushing. And Charles responds, I don't want this answer. When I ask, please tell me. And Brian says, half a second. There was no this kind of communication when Javi was around. There just wasn't. And I think things have improved on Charles's end too, because he asked very clearly for what he wanted. Even though he sounded frustrated, he was very clear with what information he needed, and Brian gave it to him. Whereas I feel like with Javi, either Charles didn't feel comfortable asking appropriately, or he may have, and then Javi never responded with an adequate answer, and so he gave up. Whatever it was, despite this scenario being shitty, and despite a really bad call throughout the race from Ferrari, it wasn't, their call was backed by data that could have worked. It was just poorly timed, and it just doesn't feel like a Ferrari strategy mistake of years past. It feels just like a coincidence, and I'm fingers crossed, toes crossed that this is not Monica Witch rearing her ugly head. Things seem to be really better, and this just is a weekend that you want to write off and forget. So Charles has DNF'd at this point, but we're not done with Ferrari yet. But first, around lap 45-ish, we just all decided to do like a random pit stop. For no reason, everyone just decided to pit. So everyone basically pitted except for Lando, who they decided to take a gamble and to stay out on inters, which left Lando as the only person on inters, because I think at this point the rain was done. We were done with the rain. Feel the rain on your tires. But there was no rain to feel because it was gone. So everyone pits, he doesn't. Max comes out on mediums, George comes out on hards, Lando is still leading. Eventually, they do pit him. He comes out right in front of Max. They like debriefed it later, and it was low-key hilarious because they were like reenacting it and like adding like sound effects to it, and like Lando's like, oh, 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 and Max was like, you came out of nowhere. It was It was funny. I've linked it. If you haven't seen the cool down room, it was pretty funny. But anyway, he comes out right in front of Max, but it didn't matter because Max's tires were warmer. Lando had just switched to new tires. He was still cold. He was still pretty slow. Max overtook him pretty much immediately. And then almost right after, George overtakes Lando into P2. Honestly, terrible take from McLaren. Terrible. Anyway, a few laps later, George made another mistake, ran wide, hit a curb, and it gave Lando the opportunity to overtake him back into P2. And now George has to overtake Lando back. And it was such a silly mistake that Toto gets on the radio and they show him, like, it was a very dramatic shot of like him looking for George's name on his like little radio button things and clicking George and going, "Focus, George. Focus." Don't know if it worked, but he did tell him to focus. And George eventually did rally, but like George just panics and makes so many mistakes. And then there's another incident. Checo, I don't actually know what happened with Checo, but car parts were flying off and he has to limp his way back to the pit where he retires. And it was like important to note that he was told on the radio that he has to make it back because they didn't want to cause a safety car for Max because he was in the lead, but not by that much because we're more even now and it's more exciting. But Checo makes it back. He's DNF'd. And literally half a second after that, we get the Carlos incident, which did cause a safety car. So it wasn't Checo's fault. Checo wasn't at all involved in the Carlos thing. He wasn't the one who caused the safety car. Not that the safety car made a difference for Max, but it happened like one after the other. Carlos basically, I guess he called it a mistake. I saw some other people call it a mistake. It didn't look like a mistake to me. It just looked like bad luck. He hit a wet spot and started spinning, and he's like spinning like a freaking dreidel. And Alex just happened to be in the hitting range of said dreidel F1 car, and he gets like basically T-boned into the wall. That sounded much more dramatic than it was. Like, it wasn't one of those like totaling of an F1 car. It still looked pretty bad. Alex was fine though. And he was on his way to points, and now it's a double DNF for both Williams and Ferrari. It's so sad. So now we're on our final DNF count of this episode. We've got Logan, Charles, Checo, Carlos, and Alex. 5 total. 2 teams, double DNF. All right, so this is where the top 5 start to get really interesting. George tries to overtake Oscar. Oscar is somehow in P3. He overtook George. George tries to overtake Oscar back into P3, but Oscar is defending super well. Oscar gets told that they were asked to hold position on the radio, but then is asked if he thinks he could catch Max if he was let ahead of Lando. And Oscar very graciously, or very honestly, whatever, I think it's both honestly, said that I have to worry about George behind me, leave me to it. Which is, I think, the most I've ever heard him speak on the radio. George lunges towards Oscar. George ends up going off and ends up even like losing a place to Lewis. And then Lewis is in P4 ahead of, and now George has to overtake 2 people. It was kind of crazy. And then Lewis overtakes Oscar. And then he has to overtake Lewis. But the Oscar thing was weird because he like lunged forward, but Oscar kept the racing line. But because Oscar was positioned correctly, it's not his fault. He's positioned where he was supposed to be and didn't budge from where he was supposed to be. It was George that pushed himself into a spot that he was not necessarily supposed to be. So even though he ended up going off the track because of where Oscar's car was positioned, it was his fault. And he did get called to the Suze afterwards. And it was really funny. He was in the middle of the post-race press conference, and then the main guy, Tom Clarkson, is that his name? I fully made up that name, but he goes, "We're gonna have to let you go, George. You've been summoned to the stews." And George goes, "What for?" And there was a zoom in of Max's and Lando's face when he gets called, and Max is full on side-eyeing him, like full side-eye. Lando has his eyebrows like properly raised, like literally like when you would, if you were doing like an amateur play and you told the kids, this kid just got called to the principal's office, react. That's what it looks like. It's like such dramatic, exaggerated facial features, but he was called for the Oscar incident and they decided not to investigate further. Anyway, so at that point, George has to overtake both Lewis, both Oscar and Lewis, he does eventually. He rallies, so I'm proud of him. But he still made a lot of fucking mistakes, and to end up in P3 after P1 is unfortunate, but fully his fault, actually. Like, you can't even... Luck has nothing to do with it. He just made many, many mistakes. Also, what was tragic is Lewis ended up keeping P4, and this made it his first top 5 finish this year. He can't wait to go to fucking Ferrari. I can't wait for him to go to Ferrari. Not only for him to like cook on track, I just think he's gonna be a more fun person. Like, these past years have been torture. And I just think Lewis needs a car that he can compete in and like feel like a racer and a competitor again. And I really think Ferrari's gonna give him that. And so I'm excited for that, despite the fact that I don't think Carlos should have lost the seat. Anyway, the final results was Max winning, followed by Lando, followed by George. Some observations I've had. One observation actually that I had was this was a bad day for contract renewals. We had 2 announcements for contract renewals, and that was Checo and Yuki. And Yuki had some incident and he ended up finishing in P14 even though he was in the points, and it wasn't really his fault, it was just bad luck. And Checo, I don't know what's going on with Checo, but that's what it is. So the last thing I want to talk about is Esteban and Pierre. So there was some crazy radio stuff going on, and this is where like it became obvious Esteban was not okay. Not that I ever thought he was going to be okay with being fired, but like he's like really upset. Engineer tells Esteban, we have to let Pierre through. Please, gap behind him, 2 seconds to Hülkenberg. Ocon goes, what's the reason? Engineer, we need to try and attack Ricardo. Ocon, yeah, forget it. Engineer, okay, that is a request. Got 3 laps to go. Ocon says, are you going to give the place back after or not? And the engineer says, that's what I'm working on. Ocon says, okay, I let him by. Understood. This was around lap 69 of the 70-lap race. And then engineer goes, Esteban, the cars are not swapping places. Push to the end, please. And Ocon goes, yeah, amazing. Thank you. Amazing. Thank you. It was heavy with sarcasm. And engineer goes, okay, the radio is still on. And Ocon goes, okay, mate, yeah, you're good. Okay, yeah, okay, no comments. Too nice. Okay, mate. Engineer goes, okay, listen, we still came 10th. We've still got a point, okay? It's a long way to go yet. Okay, I know it's frustrating. Ocon goes, I've done what I had to do, which is what's most important. But you guys didn't do what you had to do. That's it. Engineer goes, what I'll say is we came P10 and we started right at the back with very little hope of getting anything out of this. And most of that is down to the fact that you drove very well and kept a cool head through difficult conditions. So you should be very pleased with yourself for that. And thank you for doing that as well. Ocon goes, thank you. Yeah, happy to be working with you guys too, Dave and Josh, very happy. Ocon goes, thanks for supporting. And engineer goes, sorry, mate, long way to go. Another 15 races, yeah? And after I feel bad for the engineer. He's like between a rock and a hard place, because I'm sure he's very close to Esteban and he cares about him, but he works for Alpine. And it's just like hard. After the race, Ocon spoke to the media and said, I think today I've done my part of the job, but I don't think the team did their part of the job. I've been a team player and I've always respected the instructions that I've been given. Always. It's always been the case, and I showed it once more today. But the nice guy doesn't always pay off in Formula One, and that is bothering me a lot. I think Esteban thinks he's the nice guy. I truly do. But I feel like evidence shows he's not that nice. But damn, that drama was crazy. And his engineer is right. Esteban started P18 and finished P10. That's an amazing, I know 5 people DNF'd, but that's still an amazing feat. And Gasly started P15 and finished P9. An amazing feat. I'm not exactly sure when the first instruction to let Pierre through came, but Esteban did only let him through with 1 lap left of the race. So to expect to get the position back like 30 seconds later is a bit unrealistic. But I get he's upset. Also, this is the happiest I've seen Max after winning a race in a long time. Like, he's had to work for it the last few days, and it shows. And I think he's having more fun, even though before he would say, like, this is great, I love this. But, like, I think he's had fun competing again. The driver of the day was Lando Norris. And I would like to point out that of the 6 last drivers of the day, Lando has won it 4 times. The other 2 were won by Charles. Very impressive from Lando. Max and Lando, I think, both drove pretty well today, but I think Lando's work was exceptional. his overtakes. He's did the most racy racing, I think. Whereas George made mistakes and Max basically maintained the whole time. All right, dig in the box. I think we have several contenders this week. Whoever signed a deal with the Monaco Witch to give us Monaco and then crush Charles' soul and spirit, fuck you. Carlos for accidentally tapping Alex, although I really think the main culprit this week was, in fact, the weather. McLaren also severely misjudged strategy. I think Alpine in general is all a bunch of dickheads. Just a general statement. But overall, the real dick in the box was the weather, but he was sort of an anti-hero because he really gave us a 10 out of 10 race. So the results are as follows. Max, Lando, George, Lewis, Oscar, Alonso, Stroll, Daniel, Gasly, Ocon, Nico, Kevin, Valtteri, Yuki, and Guan Yu, with the DNFs as follows. Carlos, Alex, Checo, Leclerc, and Logan. Wowza. So the standings are Max with 194, Charles with 138, Lando with 131, Carlos with 108, Checo with 107, Oscar with 81, George with 69, Lewis with 55, Fernando with 41, Yuki with 19. That's crazy. Carlos sat one race out because of his appendix, and then he DNF'd this race, and that's like set him back behind to be basically 1 point ahead of Checo in fourth. But he won a race. The constructors are as follows. Red Bull with 301, Ferrari with 252, McLaren with 212, Mercedes with 124, Aston with 58, RB with 28, Haas with 7, Alpine with 5, Williams with 2, Kick Sauber with 0. Okay, this was the final result of my poutine. For the record, not a cute dish. So I don't know why I'm showing you, like, this is amazing. It's kind of beige with some white chunks in it, but I think it's gonna taste good. Let me try. So that's it for the Canadian Grand Prix. What a ride, how fun. And next up is Spain, which is Carlos's home race, Fernando's home race, and also rumor has it when we will find out where Carlos is going next year. We've got a couple of weeks, so make sure you subscribe, share with any potential boxes. Review if you can, it means the world to me, and make sure you subscribe on social media at BoxBoxF1Pod to follow along in between races. See you soon, BoxBox.